The pirate costume was a mistake. Standing in Richard's crowded living room, watching my wife Alicia laugh at some joke I couldn't hear, I felt like the world's most pathetic buccaneer. She wore a sleek Catwoman outfit that hugged every curve, and honestly, she looked incredible. Too bad she was purring for someone else. "Greg, you look like you raided a thrift store," my 16-year-old daughter Lily said, appearing beside me in her zombie cheerleader costume. "Maybe if you dressed like Tarzan, Mom would notice you." Nice. Betrayed by my own spawn. "Thanks for the fashion advice, sweetheart. Shouldn't you be terrorizing the neighborhood for candy?" "I'm too old for trick-or-treating, Dad. Besides, this party is way more entertaining." She nodded toward the kitchen where Alicia stood with her best friend Susie, also in Catwoman gear, talking to a guy in a loincloth who looked like he spent more time at the gym than at work. That would be Dominic. I knew him from around town, ran some questionable used car lot on the east side, the kind of guy who probably thought class was something you skipped in high school. I managed several chain restaurants, nothing glamorous but steady work. At 38, I wasn't the amateur boxer I used to be, but I still had enough fight left in me to recognize when someone was stepping into my ring. "Your mom's just being social," I told Lily, though my voice sounded hollow even to me. "Sure she is." Lily rolled her eyes and wandered off to find kids her own age. I grabbed a beer from the cooler and positioned myself where I could watch the kitchen without being obvious. Richard's house was perfect for parties. Open floor plan, big backyard, neighbors who minded their own business. Tonight, though, I wished for a smaller space where conversations couldn't happen in dark corners. The Halloween decorations cast strange shadows everywhere. Fake spiderwebs draped the doorways, plastic skeletons hung from the ceiling, and carved pumpkins grinned with flickering candles. The whole scene felt like a twisted fairy tale where the prince discovers his princess has been sneaking around with the village idiot. "Greg, there you are," Richard appeared, dressed as a vampire, complete with cape and plastic fangs. "Having fun? Your wife looks amazing tonight." "Yeah, she does." I took a long drink. "So does half the neighborhood, apparently." Richard followed my gaze to the kitchen where Dominic was now leaning against the counter, way too close to Alicia. "Oh, that's just Dom being Dom. Guy's harmless. Mostly." "Mostly?" "Well, he's got a reputation with the ladies, but Alicia's smart. She wouldn't..." "Wouldn't what?" The words came out sharper than I intended. Richard held up his hands. "Hey, I'm just saying she's got good judgment. You two have been married, what, 17 years? 18 next month. If we made it that long." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. The party swirled around us. Pirates and princesses, superheroes and monsters, all playing pretend for one night. Except some of us weren't pretending anymore. Some of us were discovering that the masks we wore every day were finally slipping. I watched Dominic whisper something in Alicia's ear. She laughed, that genuine laugh I hadn't heard directed at me in months. Her hand touched his arm, lingered there just a second too long. My grip tightened on the beer bottle. In my boxing days, I learned to read body language, to spot tells and weaknesses. What I was seeing now wasn't friendly conversation. This was flirtation, pure and simple. Susie noticed me watching and said something to Alicia. My wife glanced over, gave me a little wave, then turned back to Dominic like I was just another piece of furniture. "I need another drink," I muttered. "Kitchen's that way," Richard said, pointing. "I know where the kitchen is. It's my destination." Walking across that living room felt like crossing a minefield. Every step brought me closer to a conversation I didn't want to have but couldn't avoid. The music was loud enough to provide cover, but not so loud that I couldn't hear what was being said. "Meet you there around midnight," Dominic was saying as I approached. The conversation stopped when they saw me. 3 guilty faces turned my way, and the silence stretched like a rubber band about to snap. "Having fun?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh, you know how it is," Alicia said. "Just catching up with friends." "Friends. Right. Dominic, isn't it? We haven't been properly introduced. I'm Greg, Alicia's husband." He extended a hand with the kind of cocky grin that made me want to introduce my fist to his face. "Dom, nice costume, man. Very authentic." "Thanks. I was going for Guy, who's been sailing the 7 seas looking for treasure." "What's your story? Tarzan, king of the jungle?" "Something like that." His eyes flicked to Alicia. "Sometimes you find exactly what you're looking for in the most unexpected places." The innuendo hung in the air like smoke. Susie cleared her throat, and Alicia suddenly became very interested in her drink. "Well," I said, "I should let you get back to your conversation. Oh, don't let me interrupt. I grabbed a fresh beer and walked away, but not before I heard Dominic say, "Where were we?" Back in the living room, the party continued around me, but everything felt different now. The laughter seemed forced, the costumes looked cheap, and the whole evening had taken on the quality of a bad dream. My phone buzzed. A text from Alicia. "Having fun with the guys. Don't wait up. Don't wait up." On Halloween night, when we'd planned to hand out candy together after the party. I looked back toward the kitchen. They were gone. All three of them had vanished like smoke. "Dad, can you drive me home?" Lily appeared at my elbow. "This party's getting weird." "What do you mean?" "Mom and her friends just left through the back door. With that Tarzan guy. It's gross." Out of the mouths of babes. "Yeah, let's go home." The drive back to our house was quiet. Lily stared out the window while I tried to process what I'd witnessed. 18 years of marriage, and it had come to this. My wife sneaking out of a party with some muscle-bound car salesman while I stood around in a ridiculous pirate costume. "Dad?" Lily's voice was small. "Are you and Mom okay?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. How do you tell your 16-year-old daughter that her parents' marriage might be falling apart? How do you explain that sometimes the people you trust most are the ones who hurt you worst? "We're working through some things," I said finally. That's adult speak for everything's terrible, but we're pretending it's not. Smart kid. Too smart for her own good. At home, I helped Lily sort through her candy haul while my mind raced. Alicia's phone was still connected to our family plan, which meant I could see her location if I really wanted to. The question was, did I want to know for sure? The answer was yes. And no. And yes, again. "I'm going to bed," Lily announced around 11:30. "Try not to stay up all night worrying, okay?" After she went upstairs, I sat in my kitchen, staring at my phone. Alicia's location showed she was at the Riverside Park on the other side of town. The same park where teenagers went to make out and adults went to have conversations they couldn't have at home. I could drive over there, confront them, make a scene. But that would be the expected thing to do, and I was tired of being predictable. Instead, I picked up Alicia's iPad from the counter. She'd left it behind in her hurry to leave, and it was still logged into all her accounts, including her text messages. What I found there made my stomach twist into knots. Messages between her and Dominic going back 3 weeks. Nothing explicit, but the tone was unmistakable. Flirty, intimate, building towards something. The most recent exchange was from earlier tonight. "Dominic, can't wait to see you in that costume." "Alicia, you'll have to be patient. Greg's watching everything." "Dominic, meet me at the usual spot after the party." Midnight. Alicia, "I'll figure out an excuse." I set the iPad down and walked to the window. Our neighborhood was quiet now. Porch lights glowing, jack-o'-lanterns flickering, normal families in normal houses living normal lives. But normal was over for us. The question now was, what came next? I picked up Alicia's phone, she'd left that behind too, and scrolled through her contacts until I found Dominic's number. Then I typed a message. "Meet me at the Riverside Park at midnight. Bring protection." I hit send, then turned off the phone. If they wanted to play games, I could play games. But my rules were going to be very different from theirs. The Riverside Park looked different at midnight. During the day, it was where families brought their kids to feed ducks and play on the swings. After dark, it became something else entirely. A place where secrets were shared and promises were broken. I parked behind a cluster of trees where my car wouldn't be visible from the main road. Dominic's cherry red Mustang was already there, parked near the picnic tables. He'd probably been waiting for 20 minutes, wondering where Alicia was. The October air was cold enough that I could see my breath, but I felt warm all over. Angry, warm. The kind of heat that comes from being made a fool of by people who should have known better. I'd changed out of the pirate costume and into dark clothes, jeans, black hoodie, work boots. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it right. Dominic was sitting on a picnic table, checking his phone every few seconds. Even in the dim light from the park lamps, I could see his frustration growing. He'd probably sent a dozen messages to Alicia by now, wondering where she was. Good. Let him wonder. I circled around through the trees, staying in the shadows. My old boxing coach used to say that the best fights were won before they started, by knowing your opponent, understanding their weaknesses, and striking where they least expected it. Dominic's weakness was obvious. His car. The Mustang was pristine, probably his pride and joy. Cherry red paint, chrome bumpers, custom wheels, the kind of car a guy like him would choose over rent money. I had a tire iron in my jacket and a rotten fish from the restaurant's dumpster in a plastic bag. Not exactly sophisticated weapons, but they'd do the job. Moving carefully, I approached the Mustang from the rear. Dominic was still sitting on the table, his back to me, completely focused on his phone, probably texting Alicia increasingly desperate messages. The first taillight shattered with a satisfying crack. The second one followed immediately after. Then I moved to the front and took out both headlights for good measure. The sound of breaking glass echoed across the park. Dominic jumped up from the table, spinning around to see what was happening. "What the hell?" But I was already back in the shadows, watching as he ran to his car and discovered the damage. The string of curses that followed would have made a sailor blush. While he was examining the broken lights, I slipped around to the driver's side and used my key to carve a message into the paint. Cheater. Then I opened the trunk, unlocked, because who expects trouble in a quiet park, and deposited the rotten fish inside, making sure to break the bag so the smell would really soak in. My final touch was a note tucked under the windshield wiper. From Catwoman's real man. Stay away from what's mine, or next time will be worse. I was back in my car and driving away before Dominic figured out what had happened. In my rearview mirror, I could see him standing beside his ruined Mustang, holding the note, looking around the empty park like he could somehow spot his attacker in the darkness. My phone rang as I pulled into my driveway. Unknown number, but I had a pretty good idea who it was. "You're a coward," Dominic's voice was shaking with rage. "A pathetic, jealous coward." "I'm sorry, who is this?" I kept my voice calm, reasonable. "You know exactly who this is. What you did tonight? I'm afraid I don't know what you're talking about. I've been home all evening, handing out candy to trick-or-treaters. My daughter can vouch for me. This isn't over. I certainly hope not. Things were just getting interesting." He hung up, probably because he couldn't think of a comeback that wouldn't sound ridiculous. I sat in my car for a minute, feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Satisfaction. Not the deep, lasting kind of satisfaction that comes from a job well done or a problem solved. This was darker, more immediate. The satisfaction of hitting back after being hit first. Inside the house, Lily was asleep and Alicia still wasn't home. Her location on the family tracker showed she was at Susie's house now, probably getting her story straight for when she finally decided to come back. I poured myself a scotch and sat in my favorite chair, the one that faced the front window so I could see when her car pulled into the driveway. The house felt different with just me in it. Quieter, but also more honest somehow. No pretending, no walking on eggshells, no wondering what was really going on behind the smiles and small talk. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You want a war? You got one." I typed back, "Looking forward to it." And I was. For the first time in months, maybe years, I was looking forward to something. Not the war itself, but the chance to stop being passive, to stop accepting whatever scraps of attention and affection my wife decided to throw my way. I'd spent 18 years being the good husband, the reliable provider, the guy who fixed things when they broke and kept his mouth shut when things got uncomfortable. Where had it gotten me? Sitting alone in my living room at 1 a.m, wondering if my wife was going to come home or spend the night somewhere else. Well, those days were over. If Alicia wanted to play games, I'd play games. But I'd been underestimated before, in the boxing ring, in business, in life, and it never ended well for the people who made that mistake. The front door opened at 1:47 a.m. I heard Alicia's heels clicking across the hardwood floor, then stopping when she saw me sitting in the dark. "Greg, what are you doing up?" I turned on the lamp beside my chair. She looked guilty as charged, lipstick smudged, hair messed up, that particular glow that comes from doing something you know you shouldn't be doing. "Couldn't sleep? How was your evening?" "Fine. Good. Susie and I went back to her place after the party. Girl talk, you know how it is." "Right. A girl talk." I took a sip of scotch. "Funny thing, though. I tried calling you around midnight, but your phone was here on the counter." Her face went pale. "Oh, I must have forgotten it when we left Richard's." "Must have, along with your iPad." Now she looked genuinely worried. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing, just an observation." I stood up, finished my drink. "I'm going to bed. Long day tomorrow." I walked past her toward the stairs, close enough to smell another man's cologne on her clothes, close enough to see the panic in her eyes as she realized I might know more than I was letting on. "Greg, wait, we should talk." "Talk about what? Your evening of girl talk with Susie? Nothing to discuss there, right?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Whatever she'd been planning to say, she'd thought better of it. "Good night, Alicia. Sweet dreams." Upstairs, I brushed my teeth and got ready for bed like it was any other night. But as I lay there in the dark, listening to my wife moving around downstairs, I was already planning my next move. Because this was just the beginning. Dominic had declared war, and Alicia had chosen her side. Now it was time to show them what happened when you underestimated the quiet guy in the corner, the guy who'd been watching and learning and getting ready to fight back. The boxing gym above Patterson's pawn shop smelled like sweat, leather, and broken dreams. It was where I'd spent most mornings for the past 15 years, working the heavy bag and trying to stay in shape. More importantly, it was where I could think without interruption. This morning, though, my usual routine felt different. Every punch I threw at the bag carried extra weight. The weight of anger, humiliation, and something else I was just starting to recognize. Anticipation. "You're hitting that thing like it owes you money," said Tommy Rodriguez, the gym's owner and my old trainer. He was pushing 70, but still moved like a fighter, all economy and precision. "Just working out some stress." "Uh-huh. This wouldn't have anything to do with the talk going around town, would it?" I stopped punching and looked at him. "What talk?" Tommy's expression was carefully neutral, the way people look when they're about to deliver bad news. "Word is your wife's been seen around town with Dom Castellano, that guy who runs the car lot." Castellano. I hadn't known Dominic's last name until now. "Seen doing what?" "Coffee, lunch. The kind of things married women don't usually do with single men." Tommy shrugged. "Could be nothing. Could be something. Thought you should know." The worst part wasn't learning that people were talking. It was realizing they'd been talking for a while. How long had I been the last to know about my own marriage falling apart? "Thanks for the heads up." "Greg, listen. I've seen a lot of guys go through this kind of thing. The ones who handle it smart, they come out okay. The ones who let their emotions run the show." He gestured around the gym, at the faded posters of fighters who'd peaked too early or flamed out too fast. "I'm not planning to do anything stupid." "Good, because stupid gets you arrested, divorced, and broke. Smart gets you even." After the gym, I drove to work with Tommy's words echoing in my head. Smart gets you even. The question was, what did smart look like in this situation? The restaurant was busy for a Tuesday morning. The breakfast rush was in full swing, and my staff was handling it well. I'd worked hard to build a reputation for reliability, both with customers and employees. It was something I took pride in, even if it didn't make for exciting dinner party conversation. "Mr. Patterson?" Jessica, my assistant manager, approached with a concerned expression. "There's a woman here to see you. Says it's personal." The woman turned out to be Karen Walsh, a bartender at the Black Mask, the sports bar where half the town went to drink and gossip. I knew her by sight, but we'd never really talked. "Greg, right?" "I'm Karen. I tend bar over at the Mask." "What can I do for you?" She glanced around the dining room, then leaned closer. "Look, I don't usually get involved in other people's business, but I like you. You've always been decent when you've come in." My stomach tightened. "Okay. Your wife was in last night with that guy Dom. They were close, real close, and they weren't trying to hide it." She paused. "I thought you should know. I appreciate that. There's more. They made plans to meet again tonight. Same time, same booth. I'm working, so I'll see if they show." After Karen left, I sat in my office trying to focus on inventory reports and staff schedules, but my mind kept drifting to the image of Alicia and Dominic sitting in some dark booth, making plans for their next encounter while I was at home helping Lily with homework. My phone buzzed. A text from Alicia. "Working late at the studio tonight. Don't wait up." Working late, right. I forwarded the message to myself from her phone, the one she'd left at home again this morning, then deleted the evidence. If she was going to lie to me, I might as well know about it in advance. The afternoon dragged by. I tried to stay busy, but every task felt pointless. What was the point of managing restaurants and paying bills and maintaining a normal life when the foundation of that life was crumbling? Around 5 o'clock, I made a decision. Instead of going home, I drove to Alicia's yoga studio. The place was called Serenity Now, a name that had always struck me as trying too hard. It was located in a converted warehouse in the trendy part of downtown, all exposed brick and motivational posters about finding your inner peace. Alicia was leading a class when I arrived, moving through poses with the kind of fluid grace that had attracted me to her in the first place. She looked beautiful, centered, completely at peace with herself, which made what she was doing to our marriage even more infuriating. I waited in the lobby until the class ended, watching through the glass doors as students rolled up their mats and chatted about their days. Normal people living normal lives, unaware that they were witnessing a marriage's final act. "Greg," Alicia looked genuinely surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" "Thought I'd surprise you. Maybe we could grab dinner before you have to work late." The lie came so easily to her that I almost admired the skill involved. "Oh, that's sweet, but I really can't. We're doing inventory tonight, and then I have some private sessions to plan. Private sessions? New clients. Very demanding. She kissed my cheek, and I caught that same cologne scent from the night before. Rain check? Sure. Have fun with your inventory. I left the studio and drove straight to the Black Mask. If Alicia was going to lie to me, the least I could do was get a front row seat for her performance. The bar was exactly what you'd expect. Dim lighting, sports memorabilia on the walls, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else's business. Karen was behind the bar, and she nodded when she saw me come in. I took a seat at the far end, where I could see the whole room without being obvious about it. Ordered a beer and settled in to wait. They arrived at 7:30, just like Karen had predicted. Alicia had changed out of her yoga clothes into something more flattering, a dress I'd bought her for our anniversary last year. Dominic was wearing a leather jacket that probably cost more than most people made in a week. They took the same booth Karen had mentioned, in the back corner where they could talk without being overheard. From where I sat, I could see them clearly but couldn't make out the conversation. What I could see was the body language, the way Alicia leaned forward when Dominic talked, the way he touched her hand when he wanted to make a point, the way they looked at each other like they were the only two people in the room. It was like watching a car accident in slow motion. Horrible, but impossible to look away from. Karen appeared beside me with a fresh beer I hadn't ordered. Rough night? Getting rougher. You want some advice? From someone who's seen this movie before? I nodded. Don't make a scene. Not here, not tonight. Whatever you're planning to do about this situation, do it smart. Do it when you have the advantage. What makes you think I'm planning anything? She smiled. Honey, I've been tending bar for 15 years. I can spot trouble brewing from across the room. And right now, you look like a man who's done being pushed around. She was right. I was done. Done pretending everything was fine, done making excuses for Alicia's behavior, done being the understanding husband who didn't ask too many questions. I finished my beer, left money on the bar, and walked out without looking back at the booth where my wife was building a new life with someone else. But I didn't go home. Instead, I drove to Dominic's car lot to see what kind of security he had, what kind of schedule he kept, what kind of vulnerabilities I might be able to exploit. Because Karen was right about one thing. I was done being pushed around. But she was wrong about something else. I wasn't planning to make a scene. I was planning something much more permanent than that. Dominic's car lot looked different in daylight. What had seemed mysterious and shadowy the night before now just looked shabby. A collection of overpriced vehicles on a cracked asphalt lot, surrounded by a chain-link fence that had seen better decades. I drove by slowly, taking mental notes. Security cameras at the front gate, but they looked old and probably didn't work half the time. A small office building that doubled as a garage. A sign that read Castellano's Classic Cars, in letters that were supposed to look classy but just looked cheap. This was what Alicia was throwing away 18 years of marriage for? A guy who couldn't even maintain his own business property? My phone rang. Richard's name on the display. Greg, you got a minute? I wanted to talk about last night. What about it? Well, after you left the party, some people were asking questions about Alicia leaving with Dom and Susie. People noticed. Of course they did. In a town this size, gossip traveled faster than bad news. Let them notice. Come on, man. Alicia's a good person. Maybe she just needed some air or... Richard, stop. Just stop. I pulled into a parking lot so I could focus on the conversation. I know what I saw. I know what's going on. And I know you're trying to be a good friend, but right now, I need you to be a good friend by not making excuses for her. There was a long pause. Okay. What do you need? Information. You know Dom better than I do. What's his story? Honestly, he's bad news. Always has been. Thinks he's God's gift to women, treats people like garbage when he thinks he can get away with it. I only invited him to the party because Susie asked me to. Susie. Alicia's best friend since college, the one who'd been encouraging this whole situation from the beginning. What's Susie's angle in all this? What do you mean? I mean, why is she pushing Alicia toward a guy you just described as bad news? What does she get out of it? Another pause, longer this time. I never thought about it that way. But now that you mention it, Susie's been different lately, more involved in Alicia's business than usual, almost like she's got some kind of agenda. An agenda? That was interesting. Richard, I need you to do something for me. Next time you see Susie, pay attention to what she says about Alicia and Dom. Not just the words, but how she says them. Whether she seems happy about the situation or just stirring up trouble. You think she's manipulating Alicia? I think someone is. The question is why. After I hung up, I sat in my car thinking about Susie Martinez. She'd been part of our lives for so long that I'd stopped really seeing her. She was just Alicia's friend, the one who came to dinner parties and remembered birthdays and always seemed to be around when drama was brewing. But now that I was really thinking about it, Susie had been around for a lot of drama over the years. She'd been there when Alicia had doubts about her career, when she was frustrated with our marriage, when she needed someone to tell her that her problems weren't her fault. Always supportive, always understanding, always ready with advice that seemed helpful but somehow made things worse. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Your wife tastes like vanilla and regret." The message hit me like a physical blow. I stared at the screen, reading it over and over, feeling something cold and sharp settle in my chest. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. This was about humiliation, about making sure I knew exactly what was happening and how powerless I was to stop it. But they'd made a mistake. They'd pushed too hard, too fast, and now I wasn't just angry. I was focused. I drove home and found Lily in the kitchen, making herself a sandwich. "Hey, Dad, you look terrible." "Thanks. That's exactly what every father wants to hear." "Seriously, though, are you okay? You've been weird since Halloween." I studied my daughter's face. She had Alicia's eyes, but my stubborn chin, and right now she looked worried in a way that made my chest tight. "Lily, if something were to happen between your mom and me..." "Like what?" "Like if we decided we couldn't live together anymore. What would you want to happen?" She set down her sandwich and looked at me with an expression far too serious for a 16-year-old. "I'd want you both to stop pretending everything's fine when it obviously isn't. I'd want you to figure out whatever's wrong instead of tiptoeing around each other like you're afraid of breaking something." "And if we couldn't figure it out?" "Then I'd want you to be honest about it. I'm not a little kid, Dad. I can handle the truth." That night, I waited until Alicia came home from her late night at the studio. She looked satisfied in a way that made my stomach turn, like someone who'd just finished a particularly good meal. "How was work?" I asked. "Exhausting, but productive." She kissed my forehead absently. "I'm going to shower and go to bed." While she was upstairs, I checked her phone. 3 new messages from Dominic, each one more explicit than the last. Plans for tomorrow night, suggestions for what they might do together, comments about my inadequacy as a husband, but it was the message thread with Susie that really caught my attention. Susie: "How did it go tonight?" Alicia: "Better than I expected. You were right about taking control of the situation." Susie: "I told you. Sometimes you have to be selfish to get what you deserve." Alicia: "I feel guilty, though. Greg doesn't deserve this." Susie: "Greg's had 18 years to make you happy. If he hasn't figured it out by now, that's his problem." I screenshot the conversation and sent it to myself, then deleted the evidence. But the words stayed with me long after I'd put the phone back where I'd found it. Susie wasn't just enabling Alicia's affair. She was actively encouraging it, coaching her through it, making sure she felt justified in what she was doing. The question was why. What did Susie get out of destroying my marriage? I was still thinking about it when Alicia came downstairs in her robe, looking for a glass of water. "Greg, you're still up." "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." She sat down across from me at the kitchen table. For a moment, she looked like the woman I'd married. Uncertain, vulnerable, human. "Is everything okay? With work, I mean?" "Work's fine. It's everything else that's complicated." "What do you mean?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a stranger wearing my wife's face. Someone who could lie to me every day, who could betray everything we'd built together, who could sit at our kitchen table and pretend to care about my problems while she was actively creating new ones. "Nothing," I said finally. "Just tired." She nodded and went back upstairs, leaving me alone with my thoughts and my plans. Because I was done being reactive, done waiting to see what they would do next. It was time to start setting the agenda myself. And the first item on that agenda was finding out exactly what Susie's game was, and how to use it against her. The community center's Halloween cleanup committee meeting was exactly the kind of boring civic duty that Alicia usually avoided, which made it perfect for what I had in mind. I'd volunteered to help coordinate the post-party cleanup, knowing that Susie would be there. She was on every committee in town, always ready to be helpful and involved. What I hadn't expected was how easy it would be to get her alone. "Greg, I didn't expect to see you here," Susie said as I walked into the meeting room. She was wearing one of those cardigans that screamed "suburban mom trying too hard," and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Figured I should do my civic duty. Besides, Alicia's been so busy with work lately, I have extra time on my hands." Something flickered across her face at the mention of Alicia's schedule. Oh, she's been working a lot, hasn't she? All those evening classes and private sessions. Yeah, very dedicated to her clients. I sat down across from her as other committee members filtered in. You know how she is when she commits to something. I do. Alicia's always been very focused when she wants something. The meeting was as tedious as expected. Arguments about trash pickup schedules and budget allocations for next year's decorations. But I used the time to watch Susie, to study her reactions when people mentioned their spouses or talked about their weekend plans. What I saw was interesting. Susie had opinions about everyone's relationships, subtle comments about who was settling and who deserved better, little seeds of discontent planted with surgical precision. After the meeting, I offered to help her carry supplies to her car. That's sweet of you, Greg. Alicia's lucky to have such a thoughtful husband. Sometimes I wonder if she sees it that way. Susie stopped walking and turned to look at me. What do you mean? Oh, 18 years of marriage, things get routine. Sometimes I think she might be happier with someone more exciting. Alicia loves you. But her voice lacked conviction. Does she? Because lately it feels like she's looking for something I can't give her. We'd reached her car, a sensible sedan that probably got excellent gas mileage and had never been driven over the speed limit. Susie loaded the supplies into her trunk with unnecessary care, like she was buying time to think. Greg, can I ask you something? Sure. Are you happy? Really happy, I mean. Not just content or comfortable, but actually fulfilled? It was a loaded question, the kind designed to make someone examine all the ways their life wasn't perfect. The kind of question a good friend might ask out of genuine concern, or a manipulative person might ask to plant doubt. That's a complicated question. It shouldn't be. If you have to think about it, maybe that's your answer. What about you, Susie? Are you happy? Her smile faltered for just a moment. I'm working on it. That night, I did some research. Social media stalking, internet searches, the kind of digital detective work that would have been impossible 20 years ago, but was now just part of modern life. What I found was illuminating. Susie Martinez, 37, divorced 3 years ago from a guy named Paul who'd left her for his secretary. No kids. Worked as a freelance graphic designer, which meant irregular income and lots of time to get involved in other people's business. But the really interesting stuff was in her social media history. Photos from college showing her, Alicia, and a group of friends living it up. Susie had been the pretty one back then, the one who got attention from guys while Alicia was still figuring out who she was. Then came the wedding photos. Mine and Alicia's. Susie was the maid of honor, smiling in all the pictures, but if you looked closely, the smile never quite reached her eyes. More photos over the years, birthday parties, holiday gatherings, family vacations where Susie was always the single friend tagging along. Always supportive, always helpful, always just slightly on the outside looking in. The timeline was becoming clear. Susie had watched Alicia build the life she wanted, marriage, family, stability, while her own relationships fell apart. She'd been the good friend, the supportive confidant, the one who listened to complaints and offered advice. But what if the advice hadn't been as innocent as it seemed? What if Susie had been slowly, carefully poisoning my marriage from the inside? My phone rang, interrupting my research. Unknown number again. Having fun playing detective? Dominic's voice was smug, confident. Actually, yes. It's amazing what you can learn when you start paying attention. Learn what? Oh, just how people's motivations aren't always what they seem. Take your girlfriend Susie, for example. There was a pause. What about Susie? You do know she's the one who set this whole thing up, right? The one who convinced Alicia to start looking outside her marriage for excitement? I'm just wondering what she promised you in return. You don't know what you're talking about. But his voice had lost some of its confidence. Good. Don't I? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Susie's been playing a very long game, and you and Alicia are just the latest pieces she's moving around the board. I hung up before he could respond, then turned off my phone. Let him think about that for a while. Let him wonder what I knew and how I'd learned it. The next morning, I had breakfast with Lily before school. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Do you think people can change? Like fundamentally change who they are? It was a heavy question for 7 a.m. What brought that on? Just thinking about Mom. She's been different lately. Not bad different, just different. Like she's trying to be someone else, out of the mouths of babes. People can change, sweetheart. The question is whether they're changing into someone better or someone worse. And how do you tell the difference? You watch what they do when they think no one's looking. You pay attention to whether their actions match their words, and you trust your instincts about whether they're becoming more themselves or less themselves. Lily nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense. After she left for school, I sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and thinking about change, about how people could live together for years without really knowing each other, about how the right pressure, applied in the right place, could make someone do things they never thought they'd do, about how I was changing too, becoming someone I'd never been before, someone calculating and patient and willing to play a very long game. My phone buzzed with a text from Alicia. Working late again tonight. Don't wait up. I smiled and typed back, Have fun at work, honey. I love you. Because I was learning to play the game too. And unlike Susie, I wasn't interested in destroying lives for sport. I was interested in justice. And justice, as it turned out, required a very different kind of patience. The Black Mask was busier than usual for a Thursday night. The local college had won some important game, and half the town was celebrating. Perfect cover for what I had planned. I'd been watching Alicia and Dominic's routine for a week now. They met every Thursday at 8:30, always took the same booth, always stayed for exactly 2 hours. Creatures of habit, which made them predictable. And predictable people were easy to manipulate. Tonight, though, I wasn't there to watch. I was there to listen. Karen had helped me set up a small recording device near their usual booth. Nothing fancy, just something that could pick up conversation in the immediate area. Technically illegal, probably inadmissible in court, but I wasn't planning to take this to court. I was planning something much more direct. They're here, Karen said, nodding toward the entrance. Alicia looked radiant in a way that made my chest tight. She was glowing with the kind of happiness I hadn't seen from her in years, the kind of happiness that used to be reserved for me. They settled into their booth, ordered drinks, and began their usual intimate conversation. From my seat at the bar, I could see them but couldn't hear what they were saying. That's what the recording device was for. What I could see was the body language, the way Dominic kept checking his phone like he was expecting a call, the way Alicia seemed more animated than usual, like she had news to share. 20 minutes into their conversation, Susie walked in. This wasn't part of their usual routine. Susie never came to these meetings. She was too smart to be seen in public with them, too careful to leave evidence of her involvement. But tonight, something was different. She walked straight to their booth and sat down without being invited. Even from across the room, I could see the tension in all three of their faces. The conversation that followed was intense. Susie was doing most of the talking, gesturing emphatically while Alicia and Dominic listened. Whatever she was saying, they didn't like it. After 10 minutes, Susie left as abruptly as she'd arrived. Alicia and Dominic sat in silence for a long moment, then began what looked like an argument. Heated whispers, sharp gestures, the kind of body language that suggested their perfect little affair was hitting some bumps. They left separately, Alicia first, looking upset, then Dominic 5 minutes later, looking angry. I waited another hour before retrieving the recording device. Karen helped me test it in her office behind the bar, and what we heard made everything clear. Told you this was getting too complicated. Susie's voice was sharp, impatient. Greg's not as clueless as you thought? What do you mean? Alicia sounded worried. I mean, he's asking questions about your schedule, about your happiness, about whether you might be looking for something outside your marriage. He said that? Dominic's voice was tight. Not in so many words, but he's fishing, and sooner or later he's going to catch something. So what do you want us to do? Alicia asked. End it, now, before this blows up in all our faces. I'm not ending anything, Dominic said. I'm having too much fun. This isn't about fun anymore. This is about survival. Whose survival? Alicia's voice was small. There was a long pause before Susie answered. All of ours, but especially mine. What does that mean? Another pause. Then, it means I have more to lose than either of you realize, and I'm not going down because you two couldn't keep it quiet. The conversation continued for another few minutes, but the important part was clear. Susie wasn't just encouraging the affair, she was orchestrating it, and now that it was threatening to expose her, she was ready to shut it down. But what was she trying to hide? What did she have to lose that was worth destroying my marriage? I spent the next day digging deeper into Susie's background. Property records, court documents, anything that might explain her motivation. What I found was a lawsuit. 3 years old, filed right around the time of her divorce. A former client was suing her for breach of contract and fraud. Apparently, she'd been hired to design a website and marketing materials for a small business, but instead of delivering what she'd promised, she disappeared with the advance payment. The case had been settled out of court, but the details were ugly. Susie had been struggling financially, had taken on more work than she could handle, and had started cutting corners. When clients complained, she'd made excuses and promises she couldn't keep. Eventually, it had all caught up with her. The lawsuit, the divorce, the professional reputation in ruins. She'd had to start over, rebuild from nothing. But starting over required money, and money required opportunities. I thought about the timeline. Susie's divorce had been finalized 3 years ago. Her financial troubles had started around the same time, and that's when she'd started becoming more involved in Alicia's life, more interested in our marriage, more ready with advice about what Alicia deserved. What if it hadn't been about jealousy at all? What if it had been about opportunity? I pulled up Alicia's financial records, something I had access to as her husband, though I'd never bothered to look before. Over the past 2 years, Alicia had been making regular payments to SM Design Services. Small amounts at first, a few $100s here and there. But recently the payments had gotten larger, much larger. SM Design Services. Susie Martinez Design Services. My wife had been paying her best friend thousands of dollars. For what? I called the number listed for SM Design Services. Susie answered on the second ring. Susie Martinez Design. Hi, this is Greg Patterson. I'm calling about the services you've been providing to my wife, Alicia. Susie, are you there? Greg, what do you want? I want to know what my wife has been paying you for. Because according to my records, she's given you almost $15,000 over the past 2 years. That's for design work. Website maintenance, marketing materials. Alicia teaches yoga. She doesn't need $15,000 worth of marketing materials. Another long pause. Then, we should meet. In person. There are things you don't understand. Oh, I understand plenty. I understand that you've been manipulating my wife, encouraging her to have an affair, and getting paid for it. What I don't understand is why. It's not what you think. Then explain it to me. Tomorrow night, 8 o'clock, the park where this all started. And Susie, come alone. Because if I see Alicia or Dominic anywhere near that place, this conversation goes public. I hung up before she could respond, then sat back in my chair and tried to process what I'd learned. My wife's best friend had been blackmailing her, using their friendship, using her knowledge of Alicia's insecurities and frustrations to extract money. And when that wasn't enough, she'd pushed Alicia into an affair. Maybe for more blackmail material. Maybe just to keep her distracted and dependent. Either way, Susie had been playing a game that was about to end. Because tomorrow night, I was going to change all the rules. The Riverside Park looked exactly the same as it had 3 weeks ago, when I'd first discovered what my wife was doing behind my back. Same picnic tables, same walking paths, same sense of secrets being shared in the shadows. But everything else had changed. I wasn't the confused, hurt husband anymore, stumbling around in the dark trying to figure out what was happening to his marriage. Now I knew exactly what was happening, and more importantly, I knew who was responsible. Susie arrived 10 minutes late, probably hoping I'd give up and leave. She looked nervous in a way I'd never seen before. Gone was the confident, helpful friend who always had advice for everyone else's problems. Greg, thanks for meeting me. Thanks for coming, though I wasn't sure you would. She sat down across from me at the picnic table, keeping her purse clutched in her lap like a shield. You said there were things I needed to explain. Actually, I said there were things I didn't understand, but I've figured most of them out since yesterday. I pulled out my phone and showed her the bank records I'd printed. $15,000, Susie. That's a lot of money for someone who teaches yoga classes. Her face went pale. I can explain. I'm sure you can. You're good at explanations. Good at making people believe things that aren't true. Good at making my wife believe that her marriage was the problem, when really you were the problem all along. That's not fair. Fair? I laughed, and it came out harder than I'd intended. You want to talk about fair? Is it fair that you've been manipulating Alicia for years? Is it fair that you convinced her to have an affair so you could keep bleeding money out of her? Is it fair that you destroyed my marriage for your own financial gain? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you saw an opportunity to exploit your best friend's unhappiness, and you took it? Susie was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I was desperate, Greg. After the divorce, after the lawsuit, I had nothing. No money, no clients, no way to start over. Alicia was the only person who was willing to help. Help is one thing. Extortion is something else entirely. It wasn't extortion. Not at first. She really did need design work. Business cards, a simple website. But then she started coming to me with other problems. Marriage problems. She was unhappy, and she needed someone to talk to. So you told her what she wanted to hear. I told her the truth, that she deserved better than being taken for granted, that she was beautiful and smart and shouldn't have to settle for a marriage that wasn't making her happy. And when that wasn't enough to keep the money coming, you introduced her to Dominic. Susie's head snapped up. That's not how it happened. Then how did it happen? She met him on her own, at the gym. He was interested, and she was flattered, and she came to me for advice. I didn't discourage her. You did more than not discourage her. You coached her through it, helped her justify it, made her feel like she was entitled to cheat on her husband. She was miserable, Greg. Can't you see that? She's been miserable for years. And you made sure she stayed that way. Because a happy wife wouldn't need to pay for design services she didn't need. A happy wife wouldn't need constant advice and support and validation. It's exactly what happened. You kept her dependent on you, kept her paying you, and when that wasn't enough, you pushed her toward an affair that would give you even more leverage. Susie was crying now, tears streaming down her face, but I felt no sympathy for her. She'd made her choices just like Alicia had made hers. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "I want you to disappear tonight. Pack your things, leave town, and never contact my family again." "I can't just leave. I have a lease, commitments." "You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy my marriage for profit." I stood up to leave, then turned back to her. "Oh, and Susie, if I ever see you again, if you ever try to contact Alicia or Lily, if you ever come back to this town, I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you've been doing. The lawsuit, the fraud charges, the way you manipulated your best friend for money, I'll ruin you so completely that you'll wish you'd never been born." She looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "You can't prove any of this." I smiled and pulled out my phone again. This time, I played the recording from the bar. Her voice, clear as day, talking about having more to lose than Alicia and Dominic realized. Technology is amazing, isn't it? You'd be surprised what you can pick up with the right equipment in the right place. I left her sitting at that picnic table, crying in the dark. Part of me felt bad about it. The part that remembered the woman who'd been part of our lives for so many years, who'd celebrated birthdays and holidays and milestones with us. But that woman had been a lie. The real Susie was the one I'd just confronted, the one who'd been willing to destroy a family for money. Now it was time to deal with the other two players in this game. When I got home, Alicia was waiting for me in the living room. She looked like she'd been crying, too. "Susie called me," she said. "She told me about your conversation." "Good. Saves me the trouble of explaining it." "Greg, please, let me explain." "Explain what? How you've been paying your best friend to help you cheat on me? How you've been lying to my face every day for months? How you've been planning to leave me for a guy who sells used cars and sends threatening text messages?" She flinched at each accusation. "It's not that simple." "It's exactly that simple. You made a choice, Alicia. You chose to believe Susie's lies instead of working on our marriage. You chose to sneak around behind my back instead of talking to me about whatever problems we had. You chose to throw away 18 years for someone you barely know. I was unhappy. So was I. But I didn't handle it by having an affair." We stared at each other across the living room that had been the center of our family life for so many years, the place where we'd opened Christmas presents and celebrated birthdays and watched movies together, the place where we'd been happy once upon a time. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you make another choice. You can end this thing with Dominic, cut all contact with Susie, and we can try to figure out if there's anything left of our marriage worth saving. Or you can keep going down this path, and I'll make sure everyone in town knows exactly what kind of person you've become." "You're threatening me." "I'm giving you options, more than you gave me when you decided to start this whole mess." She was quiet for a long time, thinking it over. Finally, she said, "And if I choose to try to save our marriage, what then?" "Then we start over, completely. No more secrets, no more lies, no more Susie whispering poison in your ear. We figure out what went wrong and we fix it, or we admit it can't be fixed and we end it honestly. And Dominic? Dominic is your problem to solve. But if I ever see him near our house, near our daughter, or near you again, he's going to discover that I'm not as passive as he thinks I am." Alicia nodded slowly. "I need time to think." "You have until tomorrow night. After that, I start making decisions for both of us." She went upstairs without another word, leaving me alone in the living room with my thoughts and my plans. Because I'd learned something important over the past few weeks. I'd learned that I was capable of things I'd never imagined. Patient manipulation, strategic thinking, the kind of calculated revenge that required planning and precision. And if Alicia chose wrong tomorrow night, she was going to discover just how much I'd learned. Alicia made her choice the next evening, though not in the way I'd expected. I came home from work to find her packing suitcases in our bedroom, moving with the kind of determined efficiency that suggested she'd been planning this for hours. "Going somewhere?" I asked. "I'm leaving, Greg, tonight." "With Dominic?" "No, alone. I need space to think, to figure out what I want without everyone else telling me what I should want. I sat down on the bed we'd shared for 18 years and watched her fold clothes with mechanical precision. Where will you go? My sister's place in Portland, just for a while. What about Lily? She can stay here, finish out the school year. This doesn't have to disrupt her life more than necessary. It was a reasonable plan, the kind of mature, thoughtful approach to marital separation that counselors probably recommended, which made it all the more surprising coming from someone who'd been sneaking around behind my back for months. What changed your mind? I asked. She stopped packing and looked at me directly for the first time in weeks. Susie called me this morning. She's leaving town. Good. She told me what you said to her. About the money, about the manipulation, about how she'd been using me. And I realized she was right. Not about you, about herself. She had been using me for years. Every time I had a problem, every time I was unhappy, she was right there with advice that made things worse instead of better. Alicia sat down on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap. I've been thinking about it all day, trying to remember when it started, when I stopped talking to you about problems and started talking to her instead. When did it start? Right after her divorce. She was so bitter, so angry at Paul for leaving her, and she kept saying things like, all men are the same, and you can't trust any of them to stay faithful. I thought she was just processing her own pain, but now you think she was trying to poison your marriage from the beginning? I think she was trying to make sure I was as miserable as she was. Misery loves company, right? We sat in silence for a while, listening to the sounds of our neighborhood settling in for the evening. Normal families having normal dinners, dealing with normal problems that didn't involve affairs and blackmail and manipulative friends. What about Dominic? I asked finally. I ended it this morning, told him it was over, that I was trying to work things out with my husband. How did he take it? Not well. He said some things, ugly things, about you, about me, about what he thought our relationship meant. She shuddered. I realized I didn't know him at all. I'd been so caught up in the excitement, the attention, that I never really looked at who he was underneath all that charm. And who was he underneath? Someone who enjoyed hurting people, someone who got off on the idea of taking something that belonged to someone else. I thought about the text messages, the threats, the way he'd tried to humiliate me at every opportunity. Yeah, that sounds about right. Alicia finished packing and zipped up her suitcase. Greg, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but will you wait for me while I figure things out? How long are we talking about? I don't know, a few weeks, maybe a month. However long it takes to get my head straight and decide what I really want. I looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time in months. She looked tired, older, like someone who'd been carrying a weight she was finally ready to put down. I'll wait, I said. But not forever. And not while you're still in contact with him. I told you. It's over. I know what you told me. But Dominic doesn't strike me as the type to accept rejection gracefully. If he contacts you, if he tries to change your mind, I want to know about it. She nodded. And if he doesn't leave me alone? Then he'll discover that threatening my family was a bigger mistake than he realized. After Alicia left, I sat Lily down and explained the situation as honestly as I could. She took it better than I'd expected, better than I would have at her age. So Mom's having a midlife crisis, and you're giving her space to work through it? That's one way to put it. And the other way? The other way is that your mother made some bad choices, and now she's trying to figure out if she can live with the consequences. Lily nodded thoughtfully. What do you think she'll decide? I honestly don't know, but whatever she decides, we'll deal with it. You and me. Together? Together. That night, after Lily went to bed, I sat in my kitchen with a glass of scotch and tried to process everything that had happened. 3 weeks ago, I'd been a clueless husband who thought his biggest problem was a boring marriage. Now I was a separated father who'd discovered he was capable of strategic thinking and calculated revenge. The question was, what came next? My phone rang around midnight. Unknown number, but I had a pretty good idea who it was. She's gone. Dominic's voice was slurred, like he'd been drinking. Your precious wife packed up and left town. How does it feel to be abandoned? Actually, it feels like a problem solving itself. Thanks for calling to check on me, though. Very considerate. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Alicia ended it, Susie's gone, and you're talking to empty air. It's as over as it gets. You think you're so smart. You think you won. I think I learned something important about the people in my life. Some of them were worth fighting for, and some of them weren't. Which category do I fall into? I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. You're not in any category, Dominic. You're just a mistake my wife made that she's trying to correct." "We'll see about that." He hung up, but I wasn't worried. Dominic was the kind of guy who was dangerous when he had leverage, when he was part of a conspiracy that made him feel powerful. On his own, separated from his allies, he was just a middle-aged man with anger management issues and a damaged car. I could handle middle-aged men with anger management issues. The real question was whether Alicia would figure out what she wanted, and whether what she wanted would include rebuilding the life we'd spent 18 years creating. But that was a question for another day. Tonight, for the first time in months, I was going to sleep peacefully in my own house, knowing that the games were over and the truth was finally out in the open. Whatever came next, at least it would be honest. The boxing gym still smelled like sweat and leather, but it felt different now. Cleaner somehow, like the air had been cleared of something I hadn't realized was there. "You're looking good," Tommy said, watching me work the heavy bag. "Whatever you've been doing, keep it up." What I'd been doing was living honestly for the first time in years. No more pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. No more accepting behavior that was unacceptable. No more letting other people write the story of my life. Alicia had come back after 6 weeks in Portland. We'd started counseling, slowly rebuilding trust, learning to talk to each other instead of around each other. It wasn't easy, and some days I wondered if we were just postponing the inevitable. But we were trying. Really trying. Not just going through the motions. Susie had disappeared completely. Word around town was that she'd moved to California, started over again with a new name and a new story. I hoped she'd learned something from what had happened, but I wasn't holding my breath. Dominic had been arrested 2 months ago for insurance fraud. Apparently, his car lot had been selling vehicles with rolled-back odometers and fake inspection certificates. He was looking at serious jail time, which solved the problem of him trying to contact Alicia. Sometimes I wondered if I should feel guilty about how things had turned out for all of them. But then I remembered the lies, the manipulation, the way they'd been willing to destroy my family for their own selfish reasons. I didn't feel guilty at all. "Dad?" Lily appeared in the doorway of the gym, still in her school uniform. "Mom's making dinner. She wanted me to ask if you'd be home by 6. Tell her I'll be there." As we walked to the car, Lily said, "You know, you're different now. Both of you are." "Different how?" "More real, I guess. Like you stopped pretending to be people you weren't and started being who you actually are." Smart kid. Too smart for her own good. "Is that better or worse?" I asked. "Better. Definitely better. Even when you're fighting, at least you're fighting about real things instead of pretending everything's perfect." At home, Alicia was in the kitchen, cooking something that smelled like forgiveness and new beginnings. She looked up when I walked in and smiled. Not the careful, guilty smile I'd gotten used to, but something genuine. "How was the gym?" "Good. Tommy says I'm looking better." "You are. We both are." She was right. We were both different now, scarred but stronger, wiser but sadder, more careful, but also more honest. "Dinner in 20 minutes, she said. "Can you set the table?" "Sure." As I arranged plates and silverware, I thought about the man I'd been 6 months ago, the one who'd accepted whatever scraps of attention came his way, who'd made excuses for other people's bad behavior, who'd been so afraid of conflict that he'd let his marriage slowly rot from the inside. That man was gone. In his place was someone harder, more calculating, but also more honest, someone who knew his own worth and wasn't willing to settle for less than he deserved. Whether that was better or worse remained to be seen, but it was real, and after years of living a lie, real felt like a victory. "Greg?" Alicia's voice brought me back to the present. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," I said, looking at her across the kitchen we'd shared for so many years. "Everything's fine." And for the first time in a very long time, I actually meant it.